what should be the steps to, going about rehabbing any type of injury? First and foremost, is it, doing the standard icing and going to get an MRI, or should they go see a physician first, or what's the steps that they need to take? And you're talking directly to fighters right now, so make sure that you understand that, and just go ahead and do your thing.
Okay. Specifically with any injury, you want to do, obviously, your RICE, rest, ice, compression, elevation. First 48, 72 hours. If it doesn't get better with that, I would say go, if it feels like it's off the bone and you'll know it's off the bone or it's not in place, go get an MRI. But if it's something that's like been a repetitive issue, kind of keeps going over time, that's something I'd rather you go to a physician for, or someone that really can assess you and know what it is going on, because probably it's some type of movement pattern that you're doing over and over and over again that you kind of need to get looked at and be like, all right, well, this is going wrong or this is going wrong, and go this way. The problem with, it's not saying that I don't think you should go get an MRI. What I think, obviously when it's an acute injury and it happens right then and there, and obviously there's something traumatic going on, yes, go get it. But with fighters too, they have strong pain tolerances, right? So sometimes those guys might just go through a dislocated shoulder and not even look into it.
I'll be honest, and I don't mean to cut you off. That's about 98%. And the young guys in general, they won't tell you shit. Like right. the older guys are pretty smart. They know their body and they know that they need to preserve it and they need to have longevity. So they will say something, but a lot of them, and I was one of them too. I didn't say shit. I got a fractured foot right now. That's from kicking, and I didn't do shit about it. I just kept working on it. I kept kicking on it, matter of fact, until I can't. Now I have less dorsiflexion on one side, fucks up my hip. Now my shoulder hurts. It's chain effect. But right. Go ahead, my bag.
Lo and behold, if they were to either go first and get an MRI or go to a physician that they trust and they know is pretty good, the physician is smart enough and should be smart enough to test those ligaments or test that or do a special test to say, you need to go get an MRI and we need to confirm this before we go any further. Mm-hmm. The problem I think with MRIs though sometimes is that people define themselves by it. Mm-hmm. I don't know how many times I've had people come in and be like, I have degenerative disc disease, and I'm like, I bet you do.
So what?
It's like everyone has it, but they define themselves by it, and then they're like, well, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do that, and because they define it by that MRI, so sometimes it depends on the person, and that's where I was talking about that biopsychosocial model, which I like to use, and the clients don't necessarily know I'm using it when I'm evaluating them, but getting them talking a little bit about their situation and their life and stuff like that, because you can tell by what they have going on outside of that fight world, mm-hmm. what they're attributing towards that pain.
Is it going from the brain into pain factors of the body? Is that what we're trying to get at right now?
So you look at factors like if they bring up that they're going through a custody battle, or they're going through, they've had issues with suicidal thoughts in the past, or they've had issues with drugs and alcohol in the past, or ADHD or bipolar or schizophrenia, any of those things, you're looking at that as a flag. So if they're coming in and they're having issues with really chronic pain, and there's someone that says, well, yeah, I was diagnosed with DDD 10 years ago, and they don't want to do certain motions or certain movements because they think that it's going to inhibit them or prevent them from doing what it is they're doing, you kind of have to really work with that patient or that client a little bit closer, mm-hmm. because now you got a lot of psychological factors going in. Mm-hmm. Sure. And a lot of fighters, and I'm not saying every single one, have had a rough history. They've had a rough past. They've had some psychological issues going on. And I'm realizing that now as I work into it, like how they, one day can be really good for them and one day can be really bad for them. And that plays around with that. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I don't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
But I just, cause at this point right now, like you're getting into really deep detail of what fighters are, and in general, it takes a certain type of individual to get in the cage and actually do what we do, Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you're not that type of person, you wouldn't understand it. You couldn't even live in the world that we live in. I train general public on, at some points, and then I live in a world that I live in at American Top Team, and it's two totally different worlds. It's funny even to watch because it's just so different, and people just don't get it. But these individuals beat themselves up on a constant basis, going in there and going to war in the gym, and then going and fighting in front of millions of fans, and having, so much riding on this one particular fight that, yes, stress and overall just fatigue from that, and then having these problems with their body because of it. It does play a role, and that's why it's good to have that connection when it comes down to a clinician too, as well.
Right, and that's why if I do, and I again, me, I'm a very personal person, and a lot of people do open up to me, and a lot of what I tie in when I teach them exercises or I teach them things at the end of the session, it's really about self-love too. Like you're when you come to me, you are making an investment. You're making an investment. So when I tell you to do certain things because I want you to be the best at your sport, that's self-love. I'm trying to teach you self-love. I'm not going to misguide you. I'm not going to, guide you in the wrong direction, because that's not me and that's not who I am. And people will get that from the first time they meet me. Mm-hmm. And
true.
That's something that I no, I'm not I'm not a psychologist, but we play such a big role on that forefront with them that sometimes we are the only people that they open up to. Mm-hmm. When you put your hands on someone and you work on them, sometimes that tends to open up emotions, and they want to tell you more, personal things. And you're like, now it makes sense. And now you tie those things in, and now you try to get them out of that and be like, okay, I see that and I understand that and I hear you. Mm-hmm. But look at what, and then you got to get them to look and how this plays a part in what it is they have going on, and how you want to try and guide them to take what it is you're learning physically and what they're doing. Like you said, Phil, they're fighting at practice, they're fighting at work, they're fighting at home, they're constantly fighting in a battle, and you're trying to teach them self-love. And that's why I said when I first started at that job dealing with addicts in recovery, it transitioned me really well into working with these fighters, because those people at that time, all they need at that time is self-love or love or a connection. So if you can be a connection and guide them in a right way and be like, look, I'm sure you've had a doctor in your life that's misguided you. I'm sure you've had a doctor in your life that hasn't treated you right. But I'm here and I'm going to show you some sort of way.
If you are a fighter or someone who wants to start training in MMA, listen up. My name is Phil Daru. I am the head performance coach of American Top Team. I train some of the elite MMA athletes in the world, such as Dustin Poirier, King Mo Lawal, Frankie Edgar, Junior Dos Santos, Edson Barboza, and Joanna Jedrzejczyk. Going to MMA gyms or hiring a personal trainer can get extremely expensive over time. So if you want to get in shape and train using the exact program of the top MMA fighters for an affordable one-time price, check out Fight Ready in the description below.